against each other, promoting collaborative learning and digital game-based learning. Margarida was a professor at the University for many years, and she left for the south of France. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis, and I'm really excited to be here with you. Then when Francis sent me the program, it was like, oh, it's so exciting. Persons I really, for example, the Lego group reports or the work you are doing on co-creation, and instead music is not my field, but then I'm really, really happy to be here. And this was, this is not. No, no problem.
J'ai entendu mieux
Ah, sorry. Okay, this is okay. Well, I'm okay. Then as Jennifer, I'm not a music person. Then I'm most harmonious and musical, and this was part of the things I was lacking on the childhood, and things that I really enjoy, but I'm very bad at. Then I will learn a lot from you on the persons who are you on the music side. My research is in learning, on the learning science, but I'm not a pure learning science person. I'm coming from multimedia studies, but also computer science studies, and I'm kind of a mix of jack of all trades from different fields. That for me it's totally okay, because what we are looking at research are things that are really interconnected from different places. Then I'm now working at Nice. That is nice. Then this is part of the team, and I was really having a good time here in Quebec, working at the Faculté de Sciences et Éducation. You have seen the two towers. Then that was one of the towers, the Faculté d'Éducation, and teaching a course on game design that we really enjoyed during many years to work with different students on. But I had a crazy opportunity to run a lab on the south of France, and I was sharing this idea with my husband. Was like, you go there. Then, okay. Then first, I want to know who plays a musical instrument. In case you play, you play solo, you raise your right hand. In case you play in a battle group, your left hand. And so many fingers as instruments you play. Okay, wow. Then we have like different configurations. Excellent. And this is a question I enjoy a lot to ask because having this kind of not unique background, part of the communities I'm working on is the robotic community. Robotics that are persons working from, who is a very interdisciplinary community. Then one of the questions I'm asking to these persons who have developed an expertise on robotics is what they did play when they were kids. The similar question as Jennifer was told. Then we want to know if you are on the past playing these building things, or currently now, who is playing these things on the past, who played on the past, and who are currently still playing on bricks, Lego bricks, mechanicals, electronics, city models, tree houses. Okay, some of you still play? Okay, excellent. Okay, then the work I'm developing within the lab, and the work that was purely developed is on the co-creation. And the idea is that this co-creation happens with different tools, then different medias, different strategies, and three of the aspects we are looking at is on game design, creative robotics, and creative programming. And the word creative is super important because sometimes there's a guidance that is beyond what is proposing. Jennifer just proposed that it's a guidance that is like very step-by-step things. Then what we are looking is at activities that have a certain degree of creative freedom, that allows kids to develop a process and a solution that is not well known in advance. Then we are not interested in ultra-guided activities in which there's step-by-step guidance, but the way kids can solve problems, and we are interested also in the meaningful and societal problems to solve through these different elements and intermixing them. And maker education is like combining these different ways of creating solutions, and there's the scope or the perimeter we are working on. Then this falls into a way of considering the creative uses of technologies, separated from just using technologies for a specific pre-established way of working. Okay. Then the idea in this presentation is to go further on this idea of creative collaboration, and as was in the discussion before, creativity is super hard to assess. That is maybe the reason this is not still on the standardized obsession of all the different curriculums. And maybe one of the reasons is that the creativity is very context related. And when there's context related, it could shapes into different ways, and we need to take into consideration the task and the context and the value for the community of the solutions. Then this is not because it's hard and we have been prevented by other colleagues that creative research is like the kill road, that we are not going in this direction. Then our work in the lab, we are 5 colleagues going through this aspect of creative research, how to support and how to provide feedback and assessment on creativity, especially on collaborative learning settings. And despite we are not having, we maybe never we will catch the perfect fish, we are like creating fishing nets that are sometimes bringing things that are partial, but helps us to go closer to what we think about, what we can consider about creative collaboration. And the games inside that. Then we are having the 5 aspects that Jennifer and the colleagues from the LEGO team were proposing. These are part also of the structure of the different game perspective we were considering when reviewing the literature on game-based learning. That this is very small, but for those coming for the workshop tomorrow, we were going further on this on these different pieces. That this puzzle is about considering that when we are talking about game-based learning, is much more complicated than just considering this is very diverse. It's not complicated, it's very diverse. Then the ways, the game design perspective are full corpus of research. There's also the research that is focusing on how to integrate these games into the schools and how to integrate it into the classroom setting or informal settings. The learning experience and all these aspects are separated, and often we are going too fast and saying games are good for this or games are good for that. What we want to go is to go further and say this game mechanic in this specific context will help on that. Then it's going to a more detailed level of describing games and learning in a way we can compare peers with peers and apples with apples. Then going further, the idea of play and games as a general thing, but going further on specifically on the game mechanics and the game dynamics. Okay, this is part of the elements I will introduce. Then first, creativity. What is for you creativity? Then any of you have a super definition of that? Who wants to share? Yeah.
Something new to you, therefore levels of creativity, but something that's new to you as valuable.
Oh, fantastic. Then original and valuable. We are having here 2 of the criteria the research has raised up is the notion of originality, but also value for a given situation. Then my grandpa was having creative ideas, but his creative ideas were within his context. Then idea was inventing something that already exists. Okay, then that was creative, but it was not valuable on a certain socio-temporal context. Then creativity is always within a context. What is creative for a fourth grade class is not the same what will be creative in a top industry level. Okay, then the group of reference assessing what is creativity is important, and this is something that is super contextual. We are basing a part of our works on the work of Mishra, an idea that this creativity as an acting way of creating something that is embedded within a system and is evaluated within a system. Then maybe what is creative for a fourth grade class in a certain context will be not the same that what will be considered as creative in another context. Then we are assuming that if we are considering creativity within groups and in the classroom, we will maybe not have psychometrical validated instruments for assessing what is a creative solution, because this is socially shared. If you are looking at creativity as an intra-personal, intra-psychological perspective, then we are having all the work that has been done by Sternberg, and many others that are assessing creativity from an individual perspective. Okay, then this is not opposing these approaches. This is bringing another perspective that we are having the individual creativity, but when we are co-creating together, we are having other aspects that needs to be considered within a system. Then maybe some of you has seen Buona. Then we have here Maui, who's a shapeshifter. Then when I'm thinking on creativity, I'm often thinking of him. Then he has different characteristics, but he's adapting to the environment, that's the problem. And he's being creative in adapting, and at the same time maintaining a certain identity. Then this is one of the aspects of creativity is not being the same at the same context. And that brings another aspect is that maybe we cannot say a kid that he is a creative person. Maybe we can move into the idea that we should consider that within this activity you have been creative and your peers have considered you as that your solution, your process and your solution has been creative. Then it's not something we will badge an award saying I have a creative badge, because this is not a permanent thing. This is something that is like a physical activity. It's a performance thing that is happening within a certain context. Then we cannot maybe say we have a creativity level 1, level 2, level 3, because it's also about the attitude and the way we are engaging in an activity in a certain context. That means that we cannot grade forever. We can recognize that in a certain activity and a certain moment a person has been creative, but we cannot ensure that this person will be creative, especially in team-based settings, in another context. Okay? Then this is another aspect that is problematic, is when we want to catch fishes and have the fish on a certain vocal for forever. You got this specific math content and we can check that you got it. Maybe for these transversal competencies, we cannot consider that because a person has been behaving in a certain way in a certain activity, these persons will behave in the same way in another activity. Okay? Then, as you were introducing the creativity as a way to find different solutions, and this is a task we love to propose, is that the Guilford task on thinking about the chair, how many uses it will have. Okay, but also considering how context is shaping these ideas. And when you are using the Guilford task, among industrial professionals, they are not providing the solution. Then the context is super important, and how our experiences and our prior knowledge is shaping the solutions we are providing is also important. Then there's the cultural aspect that is also there. Then one of the aspects we are currently working on is on the social cultural factors in creativity. Then how from the analysis of a given problem situation into the iterative process of creating a solution, the social cultural factors in a team that will have a diversity of social cultural backgrounds and knowledge, prior knowledge, and others are mixing together into a solution. Okay. Other aspect, and the last aspect of creativity, is that sometimes there has been efforts to evaluate it automatically. This is a tendency of humans. We want to automatize things. We dream of this idea of making things easier. But we take fun of having a big group of students, more than 100 students, creating games, amateur games on Scratch. And then we assessed their productions through an automatic assessment tool, Dr. Scratch, and also manually using criteria that are contextually based. What we are having is very clearly that we are having, one, a better appreciation of the productions, when this is a human that is working on rubrics and criteria that are considering the context of the production, that when we were grading automatically based on different features. But also we are having a wider spectrum. Then maybe there's an issue in education and creativity if we want to over-rationalize processes and we want to industrialize education. Creativity is something that is difficult to industrialize and to automatize. Okay. This is also a superpower because that makes it different from machines. Okay. Then there's a tension that you were raising also, that is that how still there's a tendency of education to want to organize things, control things, evaluate, assess, etc. And the aspect that creativity means slow education, because we need context, because we need to consider the process, we need to consider the appreciation from colleagues, then this is not going in the direction of standardizing things and optimizing things. Okay, and then the question we have a long time being behind that is that can technology support the creative collaboration? Then I'm looking at this tension that Jennifer was also addressing, that there's a lot of edtechs that are low quality, that are just drill and kill things with the pre-established elements that even makes more reduce the spectrum of the knowledge that the kid could have in an analogical context. Then there could be a risk of going to create educational resources that will replace what are doing teachers when creating specific resources for their classes. In France, there has been a big investment on educational resources, big investment, and this big investment has been like, we will produce the best resources for the teachers. Teachers are not using that. They have no time to find the best resources because there's a lot. And second, the teachers that are committed to quality want tailored ad hoc experiences for their kids. Then this is not meeting anyone, and they were super stressed because there has been a lot of investment. Then the idea is to go on the opposite way, is how we create the affordances for the kids, for the teachers, to provide them tools to create things that are meaningful for them in a specific context. But that means, and I'm talking from the tensions in the French perspective of education, that means that we give control to the educational system actors. Okay. Then when you have a very centralized educational system, very top-down, this is another tension that is inside. You want everything to be controlled from the top to the down. And then instead of proposing alternatives and choices, you try with the researchers selected from the very evidence-based perspective to find the specific resources that are the best recipe for the most of the learners. But this is a way of thinking education as really, well, pre-established thing and not community inquiry into knowledge. Then there's also something that is appearing. Then when we were working on these uses of technologies, one of the work we went from is that Key and colleagues that are working on this active engagement perspective are considering how persons are engaging into learning. We went on to the creative engagement with the technologies. What we are doing with technologies? Are we just consuming that as pre-established content that will be obsolete in a certain way? Or are we having technologies we can create with? Are these technologies we can create with for teams? Are there for communities? Then we tried, and this was mostly for teaching purposes, to try to show future teachers about different ways of considering technology and considering are technologies you are using able to support you in just passing information, this inverse flipped classroom tendency of canning, putting in a can contents and then having these educational resources. Are you just doing an interactive usage of the technologies by allowing the learner to click and something, or are you engaging the learners in content creation? Okay. Then when considering the music perspective, there's even more perspectives because when considering music, it's not only about how you select or create or edit different ways of art with pre-existing pieces of music, but it's also about playing, it's also about creating, and the spectrum that is between the play and the creation perspective that is like sometimes modding a little bit or adapting. Okay, then there's a lot of perspective. Then one of the aspects we have been looking into for a research perspective is the intergenerational creative programming workshops. The idea is to bring in persons, as was proposed by Francis, from different backgrounds, from different ages, and going together to solve a problem from the community. And put the problem on the first and technology on the second, and engage them on creating things through technology. The idea behind that is to go not only on developing certain knowledge and competencies and confidence, as also you were pointing on, confidence, and we master the tools we are using, we are not just consumers, but also on helping on developing a techno-creative citizenship that is not just we are unhappy about things, we have the possibility to engage in communities to transform things. Then developing this creative and critic ownership of the tools we are using, on digital tools, is for us a very important aspect on the agenda, that is not allowing anyone explaining that artificial intelligence will transform anything. It's not about asking persons for understanding what is the algorithm behind the service they are using, and making persons very aware about the intentions that could be behind this idea of putting technologies in a black box. Okay, and this was just on the here in the campus. Then the competition that is a mix of competition and cooperation, and there were primary kids from a village near Quebec that were creating their own frog for addressing development durable, eco-friendly solutions to the community, and they were super happy. Okay, and then the last aspect of this collaboration and games, then the intersection of the research is at the same time on CSCL, computer support collaborative learning, but also on game-based learning, when there's a big corpus of research behind that. And one of the aspects we were looking at is when we are playing together, what what are the mechanisms and what are the actual dynamics that are behind that? Are we engaging in sharing a common goal, or are we competing against each other? What are these different ways of being together winning a game? Okay. Then when we are on games, most of the times we are having this at the same time the individual dimension, the small group, other groups that will be in competition or on cooperation with our group, and sometimes the crowd perspective on games. Okay. Then, if we are considering this idea of challenge, also translated as competition in some way, in a positive competition, we are playing for achieving a goal. Then this is a personal challenge for ourselves. Then we are competing. We are competing with ourselves. We can compete with another person, or we can compete with other persons. Then this idea of competition and challenges. It has been having bad press, but we can reshape it in a way, in the way that we implement it, in a way that is positive. It's not against the others and for being better than the others, but it could be a mechanism that could be engaging in making things better and doing this playful effort that could be interesting to go through. And it's about how we implement correctly these challenging and competing things, instead of saying, no, we are just going through cooperation. Okay? Then when we are looking at how to implement and support collaborative learning into games, we should consider at the same time user experience, the gameplay, the storytelling, what is the goal or the main meta objectives to go through, and the collaborative learning aspects on that. Okay. Then what are we having as from very even ancient research on collaborative learning is that these cooperative learning situations can lead to a healthier process, and we are having also data now from educational robotic tasks that is when together teams are more resilient than when we are giving complex tasks to a unique individual. That makes sense. We can sometimes give up if we are alone and we doubt of our capacity to solve the task. But when we are in teams, we develop a higher levels of self-esteem. Then a lot of interactions are cooperative interactions live, when you were providing this idea of pushing things together. And there's also an ethical and an axiology also on this cooperation. We should learn to cooperate, and this is not happening naturally. Then different ways of doing that on inter-individual competition, then individuals competing against each other. And this, there was a paper recently on the dark sides of gamification. This is a mechanism that is not always leading to a good learning experience, and either to engage in better performances. Then now that there's enough research on these different gamification elements, we know that the leaderboards and the points and the things that are comparing learners from each other are working for those who are winners, but are unmotivating those who are not on the winning side. Then we should be very careful about how we provide feedback, and how we provide feedback in a way that is stimulating persons and not making them feel that they are less good than others. Okay. The other mechanism that is appearing to be interesting is this intergroup cooperation and intergroup competition, that is developing cooperation inside the group, but competing, being challenged by other groups. And after doing that from a research perspective, someone was saying, oh, but this is happening all the time in the most popular sports. Yes. This is what happens in hockey and what happens in soccer and many other sports, is that there's intergroup cooperation and this intergroup competition, that mixing this mechanism at different levels could be something interesting too, because we are at the same time on this cooperative mechanism that helps learners to share knowledge and share resources, but at the same time, they are talented in not just, okay, we are good at team, it's, other teams are doing the same process, and there could be a comparison or there could be a way to stimulate teams from each other. Then we were developing this work also from different ages perspective, and I like to also, in case you're interested on this intergenerational perspective, we were looking at how this play happens, and it's very studied on early stages of development as a way to understand the world around us, but also how seniors are engaging in games and going beyond the stereotypes that older persons doesn't play. We have a great diversity of players among the different age groups, and also when we are looking at the results of the workshops we are running, there's really amazing things and things that are not age related in the way we create games and the way we play games. Well, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have some questions before the coffee break? Andrea. Okay, so anyhow, you can continue to talk with you during the coffee break or during the lunch.